Okay, so picture this. You're finally on that dream trip to Japan, about to try some incredible ramen. But first, you got to deal with the usual travel headache, figuring out how to pay, cash, card. Well, how about something totally different? That's what we're diving into today. Korean e-wallets, like Never Pay, Kakao Pay, and Toss Pay, and how they're shaking things up globally. Get ready for some crazy growth numbers, and maybe even some travel hacks you can use on your next adventure.
What's really fascinating here is that these Korean e-wallets aren't just growing, they're exploding onto the scene. We're looking at a 443% increase in overseas payments from 2022 to 2024, totaling a huge 640.31 billion won, roughly 445 million US dollars.
Wow, those numbers are seriously impressive. What's driving this massive growth spurt?
Well, part of it is definitely the big rebound in international travel post-pandemic, but there's a deeper strategy at play too. You see, Korean fintech companies are facing really intense competition back home, especially from those big credit card companies. So going global isn't just an option for them, it's a necessity.
So they're kind of like a band, trying to make it big by touring internationally, because their local scene is too crowded.
That's a great analogy. And just like bands trying to win over new fans, these e-wallets need to convince global consumers to ditch their credit cards and embrace a whole new way to pay.
Right, that makes sense. Speaking of winning over new fans, one of our sources shared a story about a Korean mom who took a trip to Japan. She had never even used Kakao Pay in Korea, but a friend convinced her to try it out on the trip, and she ended up saving 10,000 won, about $7, on a 100,000 won purchase, just by using the app.
Yeah, that's a perfect example of how these e-wallets are tapping into that growing desire for convenience and savings. Especially among travelers, they're not just offering a different way to pay, they're offering tangible benefits.
So it's not just about ditching the plastic, it's about getting more bang for your buck, too. But how are these companies actually attracting users and going global? Are they all using the same playbook?
Not exactly. You see, while credit card companies are sticking to their familiar strategy of travel cards with good exchange rates, e-wallets are taking a different approach. They're focusing on partnering with local businesses in countries where QR code payments are already super common, like China and Southeast Asia.
So instead of trying to convert everyone to a new system, they're integrating into existing ones. Smart move. But it's got to be a pretty competitive landscape. What sets these e-wallets apart from each other? What are their strengths?
You're absolutely right. The competition is definitely heating up, both domestically and internationally, and each company is playing to its strengths. Take TossPay, for example. They were actually the last to enter the global game, but they're catching up quickly. They're now live in 56 countries, and they're pushing the boundaries with pay-by-face technology.
Wait, hold on. Pay with your face. That sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie. I'm picturing myself paying for ramen just by smiling at a scanner. But seriously, what are the implications of something like that?
Well, it definitely raises some interesting questions. The technology itself is fascinating, but it also brings up those important considerations about privacy and security, and even user adoption. I mean, how comfortable are people really with handing over their biometric data just to pay for a meal?
That's a really great point. It's definitely something to think about. What about the other players? What's Kakao Pay up to?
Kakao Pay is really focusing on those strategic partnerships, and they've scored some major wins, like teaming up with Alipay in China and PayPay in Japan. This gives them access to a massive network of vendors.
So they're basically playing the if you can't beat them, join them game.
But they're also making some smart moves on their own. Kakao Pay is actually the only Korean e-wallet that lets international users pay at Kakao Pay affiliated stores within Korea itself. It's a clever way to attract tourists and get them hooked on the platform before they even leave the country.
That's pretty strategic. So it sounds like we've got three major players here, each with their own unique approach to conquering the global market. But they're all competing for the same pool of users, right?
Absolutely. And that competition is only going to get more intense. All three companies are pulling out all the stops to attract users, offering discounts, cashback rewards, and a seamless user experience. It's a race to the top, and the consumer is the ultimate winner.
So what does all of this mean for someone like me? A travel enthusiast, always looking for the easiest and most cost-effective way to pay on the road. Should I ditch my credit cards and download all these apps right now?
Well, it's definitely worth exploring. But before you do, let's dive a little deeper into the security side of things. After all, trusting a new payment system with your hard-earned money is a big decision. We need to talk about how these companies are addressing those concerns about data privacy and fraud protection.
All right, so let's talk about security. Is it actually safe to trust these Korean e-wallets with our money? What are they doing to keep our information secure?
That's the big question, right? And to be fair, these companies are taking security very seriously. They're using things like advanced encryption technology, multi-factor authentication, and really sophisticated fraud detection systems, all to protect user data.
Okay, so they've got the tech side covered. But what about all those data breaches we keep hearing about? Are these e-wallets any more vulnerable than just using our regular credit cards?
Yeah, that's a valid concern. No system is perfect, of course. But these e-wallets are designed with security as like a core principle. In a lot of ways, they can even be more secure than traditional credit cards. For example, when you use an e-wallet, you're not actually sharing your actual card details with the vendor. You're using a unique token that's only for that specific transaction, which adds another layer of protection.
So even if someone hacked into the system, they wouldn't be able to see my card info.
Exactly. And think about it if you lose your phone. Your e-wallet is protected by a PIN, or like your fingerprint or Face ID, making it way harder for someone to get your money than if you lost your actual wallet with all your cards.
Okay, that makes sense. But I'm still wondering, why should I switch to a Korean e-wallet? I mean, I've been using my credit card for years with no problems. What's the real benefit for me?
Well, besides the security and potential savings we talked about, there's also just the pure convenience factor. Imagine not having to mess with cash or carry a bunch of cards around. You just tap your phone and you're done.
Yeah, that would be super nice when traveling. No more trying to figure out foreign currency or worrying about bad exchange rates. But isn't using an e-wallet kind of limiting? What if I'm somewhere that doesn't accept them?
Well, that's where those partnerships we mentioned really come in.
Yeah.
By teaming up with big players like Alipay and PayPay, these Korean e-wallets are expanding their reach really quickly. They're basically creating this huge global network of vendors that accept these payment methods, making them more and more usable, even in places that maybe haven't used them as much before.
So it's like a snowball effect. The more people use them, the more places accept them, which encourages even more people to get on board. Do you think this could actually lead to a future where e-wallets are like the main way to pay, even more than credit cards?
It's definitely possible. I mean, we're already seeing this big shift towards mobile payments in general, and these Korean e-wallets are leading the charge. They're easy to use, they offer good rewards, and they're always coming up with new ways to improve the experience.
This reminds me of when online banking first came out. People were hesitant at first, but now it's like totally normal. Do you think we'll see the same thing happen with e-wallets?
I think it could happen. The key is really building trust and showing people the value. These Korean e-wallets are doing a good job so far, but it's definitely a process.
So even though these e-wallets are growing globally, they still have some hurdles to overcome when it comes to getting everyone to use them.
Oh, for sure. Getting people to change their habits is a challenge, especially when it comes to how they pay for things. And there's also all the different rules and regulations in each country. And of course, they got to keep up with the latest technology and security.
So it's a lot more than just building a cool app. It's about understanding how people behave, navigating all those regulations, and creating a system that people can rely on.
Exactly. That's why this is such a fascinating example of business innovation. These companies aren't just changing how we pay. They're shaking things up and forcing those traditional financial companies to adapt.
It's like a classic David versus Goliath story. But in the world of fintech, speaking of Goliath, what about the credit card companies? How are they reacting to all this? Are they just watching or are they fighting back?
Oh, they're definitely not ignoring it. They're investing a ton of money into their own mobile payment solutions, partnering with tech companies to boost their digital offerings. It's a fierce competition. But ultimately, it's good for the consumer because it leads to more innovation and more choices.
So like a rising tide lifts all boats.
In a way, yeah. But it's also kind of like survival of the fittest, the companies that can adapt and keep innovating and offer the most value to their customers. Those are the ones that will succeed.
It sounds like the future of payments is going to be a pretty exciting space to watch. But let's bring it back to our listeners. Considering everything we've discussed, what's the main takeaway here? What should people be thinking about when they're deciding whether to try these Korean e-wallets?
I think the main takeaway is that the world of payments is changing fast. These e-wallets are a great example of that change. They offer a glimpse into a future where mobile payments are everywhere.
So you're saying it's time to ditch our old wallets and embrace the smartphone?
Not necessarily. It's more about having options and picking the payment methods that work best for you.
So it's not about picking a winner. It's about having different tools and using the right one for the job.
Exactly. And that's where these Korean e-wallets fit in. They give you another option.
Yeah.
Especially for travelers.
So if our listeners are planning a trip, to Japan, Korea, or anywhere else these e-wallets are popular, it's worth checking them out.
Definitely, even if you're not traveling anytime soon. It's good to keep up with this trend. These e-wallets are just one example of how tech is changing how we handle our money.
It's like a whole new world is opening up right on our phones. But we got to remember that with new possibilities come new responsibilities. We need to be informed, understand the risks and benefits of different ways to pay, and make smart choices that work for us.
That's a great point. It's not just about using the latest tech. It's about using it wisely and responsibly.
You know, it's interesting to think about how these Korean e-wallets aren't just changing things for us as consumers, but they're also having a real impact on businesses, especially those smaller vendors in those countries where QR codes are already so popular.
Yeah, you're right. For those local businesses, it's like opening a door to a whole new group of customers. Tourists who might have been hesitant to use cash before, or maybe had trouble with credit cards. Now they have this smooth and easy way to pay.
So it's a win-win situation. Easier for tourists, and a potential sales boost for local businesses.
Exactly. It really shows how technology can break down those barriers and make it easier for economies to connect across borders. But, you know, there's more to it than just the economic side. There's a cultural aspect, too.
Oh, really? What do you mean?
Well, think about it. These e-wallets are letting travelers connect with local communities in a more direct way. They can support small businesses, interact with local vendors, and participate in the local economy in a way that might not have been as easy before.
It's like they're building bridges, not just between currencies, but between cultures as well.
Exactly. That's something people often forget when they're talking about technology. It's not always just about efficiency or convenience. Sometimes it's about connection and understanding.
I like that. So we've talked about the growth, the strategies, the security, even the cultural side of things. But what about the future? Where do you see these Korean e-wallets going from here?
Well, one thing's for sure. The competition's going to get even tougher. We'll probably see more new features, more partnerships, and even more intense marketing as these companies fight for that top spot globally.
Do you think there's a chance one e-wallet could become like the main one everyone uses, creating a monopoly kind of situation?
It's possible, but I think it's more likely that we'll see a few big players sharing the stage, each one with its own special focus, maybe catering to certain groups of people, or offering unique features that appeal to different types of users.
So instead of trying to find the best e-wallet, it's more about finding the one that works best for you.
Right. And that's where being an informed consumer is important. Do your research, compare the different options, and choose the e-wallet that fits your needs and what's important to you.
Great advice. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one big thing you want our listeners to remember?
I think the main takeaway is that the world of payments is constantly changing. It's dynamic, it's diverse, and it's becoming more and more mobile. These Korean e-wallets are a perfect example of that. They give us a peek into a future where mobile payments are the norm. Whether or not you decide to use them yourself, it's important to understand these trends and how they might affect you and your finances.
It's like they say the only thing that's constant is change. And in the world of payments, that change is happening super fast.
Absolutely. And for those who are willing to embrace that change, there are so many opportunities to simplify their finances, connect with the world in new ways, and maybe even save a little money along the way.
So there you have it. Korean e-wallets are making waves in the global payments landscape, and it's definitely a journey worth paying attention to, whether you're a traveler, a tech enthusiast, or just someone who's curious about the future of money. This is something you don't want to miss. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and until next time, happy paying.